My name is Maya Rostova, and I'm 41 years old. For the last 2 decades, I have served as an officer in the United States Army, a journey that eventually led me to the most elite Tier 1 unit in the world, the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. It's a life of shadows and whispers, of missions that are never acknowledged and victories that are never celebrated. To the world, I don't exist. But for most of my life, I felt like I didn't exist to my own family, either. I never imagined that the single most dangerous and defining operation of my career wouldn't be for a flag or a far-flung political objective, but for the 2 men who had disowned me for choosing to wear my country's uniform in the first place. The irony was so thick, it was practically suffocating. What do you do when the people you're sent to rescue are the very ones who abandoned you? Before I tell you the story of how my estranged father and brother ended up hooded and bound in a Colombian cartel's dungeon, and how I was the one to kick in the door, I want to ask you something. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. And if you've ever felt underestimated or had your choices dismissed by the people who were supposed to support you the most, please hit that like button, so I know I'm not alone. And for anyone new here, make sure you subscribe, because this is a community for people who understand that sometimes the family you choose is the one that truly matters. My childhood was landscaped with the quiet, persistent hum of my own inadequacy. It wasn't a loud, abusive environment. It was far more insidious than that. It was an atmosphere of polite, corrosive dismissal. Our home in suburban Connecticut was a testament to my father's success. Richard Rostova was the founder and patriarch of Rostova Imports, a sprawling enterprise built on his sharp mind and even sharper elbows. He was a man carved from granite, his praise a rare and precious currency that was almost exclusively spent on my older brother Daniel. Danny was the heir apparent, the golden child. From the time he was old enough to read the stock market pages, he was groomed to take over the family empire. He was good at it, too. He had our father's head for numbers and a smoother, more charming demeanor that made him a natural at the business. I, on the other hand, was a conundrum my father couldn't solve. I had no interest in profit margins or supply chains. My passions were written in sweat and mud, in the burn of my lungs as I sprinted the last lap on the track. In the disciplined quiet of the martial arts dojo I joined against my father's wishes. He saw these pursuits as frivolous, unladylike detours from the path he'd envisioned for me. A prestigious business school, a respectable marriage, and maybe a token position in the company's marketing department. Anything I achieved outside that narrow framework was met with a faint, disappointed smile, and a swift change of subject back to Danny's latest triumph. I remember one evening with a clarity that still feels like a fresh wound. I was 15. I had just returned from the state track and field championships, a gold medal hanging heavy and cool against my chest. I'd broken the school record for the 800-meter run. I was flying, my body thrumming with victory. I walked into my father's study, the medal clutched in my hand, my smile so wide it hurt my cheeks. He was on the phone, a tumbler of whiskey on the coaster beside him. He gestured for me to wait, his eyes never leaving the financial reports on his desk. When he finally hung up, he looked at me, his gaze distant. "What is it, Maya?" I held up the medal, the polished gold catching the light from his desk lamp. "I won, Dad. I won state. I even broke the record." He took the medal from me, his fingers barely brushing mine. He turned it over in his hand, his expression unreadable. "That's nice, dear. Very athletic." He set it down on the corner of his desk, next to a stack of papers, as if it were a novelty paperweight. "You know," he continued, leaning back in his leather chair, "your brother's team won their regional case competition today. The dean of the business school called me personally. He said Daniel's presentation on emerging market logistics was the most impressive he's seen from a high school student. We're going out to celebrate tonight." He didn't look at me as he said it. He looked at the phone, as if expecting another call to praise his son. The air rushed out of my lungs. My victory, so vibrant and real just moments before, turned to ash in my mouth. It wasn't just that he was more proud of Danny. It was that my achievement didn't even register on the same scale. It was a hobby. Danny's was a destiny. Daniel, for his part, was never cruel. He was just oblivious. He floated through life on the buoyant current of our father's approval, and he couldn't comprehend why I chose to swim against it. He'd sometimes try to bridge the gap in his own clumsy way. "Why do you have to make it so hard, Maya?" he'd ask after another tense family dinner. "Just go to Wharton like Dad wants. You can still, run on the weekends." He didn't understand that it was never about the running. It was about finding something that was mine, something that I could build myself, away from the shadow of the roast of a name and the crushing weight of its expectations. The worst part was a slow-growing, toxic seed of resentment I felt towards Danny. It wasn't his fault he was the favorite, but I couldn't help but see him as the living embodiment of my own perceived failures. Every award he won, every word of praise he received, felt like a stone being added to a wall between my father and me. My only real ally in that house was my grandfather on my mother's side, a retired Army colonel who would visit for a few weeks every summer. He was the one who saw the steel in my spine. He never told me I was being unladylike. He taught me how to read a compass, how to tie a bowline knot, how to stand at attention until my muscles screamed. He told me stories not of corporate takeovers, but of patrols in the jungles of Vietnam, of the unshakable bond between soldiers who trusted each other with their lives. He saw the warrior spirit in me that my own father dismissed as a rebellious phase. "Don't you ever let anyone tell you who you're supposed to be, kiddo," he told me one humid July afternoon, his voice raspy. "Your old man's a good businessman, but he only sees the world through a balance sheet. There's more to life than that. There's honor, there's duty, there's finding the one thing you'd be willing to die for." He passed away when I was 16, and with him went the only voice in my family that spoke my language. The final break came the spring I turned 18. My acceptance letter to the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business lay on the dining room table, a symbol of my father's victory. Beside it, I placed a slim folder. It contained my enlistment papers for the United States Army. The silence in the room was absolute. My father picked up the folder as if it were contaminated. He read the first page, his face growing darker with every word. Daniel just stared, his mouth slightly agape. "What is this?" my father finally asked, his voice deceptively calm. "It's my future," I said, my own voice shaking only slightly. "I'm not going to Wharton, I'm enlisting." The calm shattered. He slammed the folder down on the mahogany table, making the silverware jump. "You are what? You are throwing your entire life away to go play with guns? To be cannon fodder for some politician's war? No, I forbid it. No child of mine will disgrace this family like that." "It's not a disgrace," I shot back, the years of quiet frustration finally boiling over. "It's called service. It's called honor. They're words you might not find in your business ledgers, but they mean something. They mean nothing." He roared, his face turning a blotchy red. "They are what poor uneducated boys do when they have no other options. You have options. You have the best option. You have the legacy I built for you, for Daniel, and you're spitting on it." Daniel tried to intervene. "Dad, just calm down. Maya, let's just talk about this. Maybe there's a compromise. You could do ROTC at Penn, maybe." "There is no compromise, Daniel." I cut him off, my eyes locked on my father. "He doesn't want a compromise. He wants a clone of you." The words hung in the air, brutal and true. Daniel flinched as if I'd slapped him. My father's face went cold, all the rage draining away to be replaced by something far worse, a chilling finality. "If you walk out that door," he said, his voice low and menacing, "you are no longer my daughter. The roast of a name, the support, the inheritance, it's all gone. You will be on your own. Do you understand me?" I looked at my brother, a silent plea for him to say something, to stand with me. He just looked down at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. In his silence, I had my answer. I was completely and utterly alone. I picked up my enlistment papers, my hand steady now. "I understand perfectly," and I walked out the door without looking back. The years that followed were a crucible. Basic training was a shock, but a welcome one. For the first time in my life, my physical strength and mental discipline were assets, not quirks. No one cared who my father was. They only cared if I could make the ruck march, if I could hit my target, if I could keep going when my body was screaming to quit. I didn't just survive. I thrived. I found a home in the stark meritocratic world of the military. I pushed myself harder than anyone. I volunteered for every difficult school, every grueling deployment. Ranger School was a 90-day glimpse into hell, but when I emerged I was sharper, harder, and more confident than I had ever been. My father's disapproval became a ghost that haunted my footsteps, a phantom drill sergeant pushing me to run faster, climb higher, and shoot straighter. I was determined to become so undeniably excellent at my chosen path that his opinion would become an irrelevant whisper from a life I'd left behind. My mentor through this transformation was a man named Sergeant Major Thompson, chief to everyone who served under him. He was a Delta operator from the old school, a man whose quiet presence commanded more respect than a room full of shouting generals. He saw past the angry, driven young officer and glimpsed the leader I could become. He was the one who encouraged me to try out for the unit. Selection was 2 months of sustained, calculated brutality, designed to break you down to your absolute core and see what was left. Most didn't make it. But I did. Chief never offered me praise easily. Instead, he offered something better: brutal honesty and unwavering belief. During one particularly grueling training exercise, after I'd made a tactical error that could have gotten my team killed, he pulled me aside. "Your anger is a tool, Rostova," he said, his eyes drilling into me. "You're letting that chip on your shoulder about your family make you reckless. You're trying to prove something to ghosts. We don't care about them. We care about the operators to your left and right. Channel that fire. Use it to protect them, not to impress people who don't matter. Focus." He was the father I should have had, the one who saw my strength and taught me how to wield it. Communication with my family dwindled to almost nothing. On my 30th birthday, I received an email from Daniel. It was filled with pictures of his new sprawling house in Greenwich and his new German sports car. At the bottom, a single line: "Hope you're doing well, wherever you are. Still playing soldier? Dad says hi. Dan." Playing soldier. The condescension was so reflexive, so ingrained, he probably didn't even realize how it sounded. I was in a dusty, sun-baked corner of Afghanistan at the time, having just returned from a 3-day reconnaissance mission that involved sleeping in a hole I dug with my own hands. I looked at the picture of his polished car, and then at the caked mud and dried blood under my fingernails, and I felt a chasm open up between our two worlds, so vast it was uncrossable. The final nail in the coffin of our relationship came a few years later. I had been promoted to captain and given command of my own team, a staggering honor within the Delta community. It was a moment of immense professional pride. In a moment of weakness, of foolish, lingering hope, I called home. My father answered. His voice was distant, impatient. "Yes, Dad, it's Maya." There was a pause. "I just wanted to tell you, I've been promoted. I'm a captain now." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for an eternity. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background. Finally, he spoke, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. "Is that all? Daniel just closed a 7-figure deal to expand the South American portfolio. We're very proud of him." And then I heard the click. He had hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, in the middle of a secure military base, thousands of miles from home, and felt the last, stubborn thread of hope snap. It wasn't a fiery, painful break like the day I'd left. It was a quiet, cold realization. He would never see me. He would never be proud. And in that moment, I finally, truly, let him go. I stopped seeking his validation because I finally understood it was a mirage in a desert. From that day forward, I poured everything I had into the only family that had ever truly claimed me, the men I served with. The first reports trickled in on a Tuesday morning. We were stationed at a forward operating base in a country bordering Colombia, on a heightened state of alert due to increased cartel activity in the region. The air in the Tactical Operations Center was thick, with the smell of stale coffee and nervous energy. The initial intelligence was fragmented. 2 American businessmen snatched from their hotel in Medellin. Kidnapping for ransom was common, but the group claiming responsibility was not. The Serpiente Cartel, a new and brutally violent organization led by a shadowy figure known only as El Espectro, the Spectre. They were known for their savagery, not their negotiation skills. My team, call sign Valkyrie, was on deck, the designated quick reaction force for any high-threat situations in the sector. I was reviewing drone surveillance feeds of a known Serpiente training camp when my commanding officer chief walked up behind me. He was no longer a sergeant major, but a senior officer, yet I still thought of him as the man who had forged me. His face was grim. Captain Rostova. My office. Now. The walk to his makeshift office was the longest of my life. The looks from the other intelligence analyst told me this was serious. Inside, he closed the door, a rare move that signaled absolute privacy. On the screen of his ruggedized laptop were 2 photos. They were grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but the faces were unmistakable. A little older, a little grayer, but them. Richard and Daniel Rostova. The air was punched out of my lungs. For a single vertiginous second, the floor seemed to drop away. My mind reeled, a chaotic slideshow of memories flashing before my eyes. The gold medal on the desk, the slammed folder, the click of the phone hanging up. Then years of training slammed a steel door on the emotion. The personal connection vanished, replaced by a cold, analytical assessment of the situation. 2 American hostages, high-value individuals, held by a hostile entity. My job. They were scouting for new suppliers, Chief said, his voice low and steady. Went down there against State Department advisories. Your father thought his money could buy him immunity. He was wrong. He let the information sink in, his eyes watching me, gauging my reaction. This was the most important test of my career. He wasn't just my commander, he was my mentor. He knew my history, he knew the weight of what he was asking. The Serpiente are demanding $10 million and the release of 3 of their lieutenants we helped the Colombian National Police capture last month. You know our policy, Maya. The president has already signed off on a direct action resolution. This is our mission. He paused, his gaze unwavering. But it doesn't have to be your mission. If you are compromised, even 1%, I need you to tell me right now. I can stand you and your team down and pass it to the next element in the rotation. There is no shame in that, but you have to make the call, Captain. Can you do this? Can you look at those men as packages, as objectives, and execute this mission to the standard I know you're capable of? I looked at the pictures on the screen. I saw my father's arrogant pride, now replaced with fear. I saw my brother's smug confidence, now evaporated into terror. I felt a surge of something dark and ugly, a bitter taste of cosmic justice. You reap what you sow. I crushed it down. That was the old Maya. The hurt little girl. That girl was gone. Captain Rostova was in command now. I met Chief's gaze, my own eyes clear and cold. They are high-value individuals, sir. Nothing more. My team is the best one for this job. We are ready. I can do my job. He searched my face for another long moment, then nodded slowly. I know you can. Get your team spun up. We go in 48 hours. The next 2 days were a blur of intense, focused work. The planning room became my entire world. Satellite images of the suspected compound, a lavish, sprawling hacienda deep in the jungle, were projected onto a wall. We pieced together a mosaic of intelligence from human sources, signals intercepts, and drone overflights. My team, my real family, was magnificent. There was Hulk, our master breacher, a mountain of a man with the surprisingly gentle hands of a watchmaker. Ghost, our sniper and reconnaissance expert, a quiet, phantom-like presence who could melt into any background. And Doc, our 18 Delta combat medic, who could perform surgery in the middle of a firefight. They all knew who the hostages were. The news had spread through the tight-knit community on the base, but they treated it with a quiet, profound respect. There were no jokes, no awkward questions, just solid, unwavering support. "We're with you, Cap," Hulk said, clapping a hand on my shoulder that was meant to be reassuring, but nearly sent me through the floor. "We'll get your guys out." My guys. The phrase was so simple, yet it twisted something in my gut. A CIA liaison, a prim man named Sterling, with an Ivy League pedigree and a deep-seated distrust of the military, became a thorn in my side. He'd been sent from Bogotá to oversee the operation. He didn't think I should be leading it. "With all due respect, Captain," he'd said in a meeting with Chief and me, "your personal connection to the assets is a liability. Your judgment could be clouded." Before I could respond, Chief cut him off, his voice like ice. "Captain Rostova's judgment is the reason she's in that chair, Mr. Sterling. She is the most qualified officer to lead this mission. Her personal connection, as you call it, gives her an insight into the target's mindset that you couldn't possibly have. She's leading, that's the end of it." Sterling backed down, but his skepticism lingered in the air, another layer of pressure. At night, alone in my Spartan quarters, the steel walls I'd built around my emotions would begin to crack. I would stare at the ceiling, the operational plan replaying in my mind on an endless loop, and the ghosts of the past would come visiting. I'd hear my father's voice, cold and dismissive, "You are a disgrace to this family." I'd see my brother's patronizing smile in his email. "Still playing soldier," and the dark, ugly thought would whisper from the recesses of my mind again. "They made their bed. They dismissed the soldier. Now let them see what happens when the soldiers aren't there." I had to physically shake my head to clear the thought, my heart pounding with shame. This wasn't about them. This wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about my duty. It was about my team. It was about upholding the code I had chosen to live by, the one that said we leave no one behind. I was doing this not because they were my family, but because they were Americans, and it was my job. The distinction was critical. It was the only thing keeping me sane. Late on the second night, Ella Spectro sent a proof-of-life video. Chief called me in to watch it. It was a tactical necessity. We had to analyze it for clues. The video was grainy, lit by a single bare bulb. My father and brother were on their knees, hands tied behind their backs. Their expensive business suits were torn and filthy. Danny was weeping openly, pleading with the camera. "Please, just pay them. We can get the money, just pay them what they want." He looked so young, so broken. My father was a different story. He was terrified, I could see it in the slight tremor of his hands, but his pride was still fighting a losing battle. He was trying to project an authority he no longer had, his jaw set, his eyes glaring with a mixture of fear and defiance. I forced myself to ignore the content, to become a machine. I focused on the background. The type of stone on the wall, was it local? The faint sound of a generator. What model? The specific dialect of Spanish the guard was speaking off camera. I compartmentalized, dissected, analyzed. I was Captain Rostova, Valkyrie 1, and Valkyrie 1 was about to go to work. The jungle was a black, dripping void. The two Black Hawk helicopters had dropped us 5 miles out, their sound swallowed by the thick canopy and a driving tropical rain. Now we moved on foot, a line of silent, lethal ghosts melting through the undergrowth. The world was a small, green-tinted circle, seen through the lens of my night vision goggles. Every sense was on fire. I could smell the damp earth and rotting vegetation, feel the weight of my plate carrier and the 70 pounds of gear on my back, hear the soft, rhythmic squelch of my team's boots in the mud behind me. The personal turmoil, the years of anger and hurt, had been burned away by the pure, cold fire of adrenaline. My mind was a crystal, focused on one thing, and one thing only: the mission. Ingress routes, fields of fire, contingency plans, and the faces of the men who trusted me with their lives. I was no longer Maya Rostova, the rejected daughter. I was Valkyrie, the chooser of the slain, and I was leading my men into the heart of the serpent's den. After 2 hours of silent, grueling movement, we saw it. The compound. It was a fortress, a monument to narco-vanity, surrounded by a high wall topped with razor wire. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their casual arrogance a testament to their belief in their own invincibility. Ghost peeled off from the main element, disappearing into the jungle to find his sniper's perch. The rest of us crept to our designated rally points around the compound, our movements as synchronized as a predator stalking its prey. I lay flat in the mud, my rifle resting on my pack, my eyes scanning the main gate. I checked my chronometer. 10 seconds. My heart was a steady, powerful drum in my chest. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Execute, I whispered into my throat mic. The night exploded. Hulk placed a frame charge on the main gate, and the resulting blast was a deafening roar that ripped the steel doors from their hinges. Simultaneously, Ghost's suppressed rifle coughed once, and the guard in the main watchtower crumpled without a sound. We flowed through the breach like a dark tide. The compound erupted into a hornet's nest of chaos. Shouts in Spanish, the frantic barking of dogs, and then the distinctive, terrifying crackle of automatic rifle fire. The firefight was immediate and brutal. Muzzle flashes lit up the pouring rain in strobing, hellish bursts of light. My training took over completely. I wasn't thinking. I was reacting, my body moving through a deadly dance it had rehearsed 1,000 times. I dropped to one knee, sighted a target running for cover, and fired a controlled 2-round burst. The target fell. "Contact east wall," one of my men called out. Suppressing, I shouted back, laying down a stream of fire that forced 2 cartel gunmen to duck back behind a vehicle, giving my team members the precious seconds they needed to advance and flank them. We moved in a fluid, lethal choreography, communicating in clipped, coded phrases. "Hulk, breach that door. Moving. Doc, watch our 6. Got it." We were clearing the main hacienda building, room by room, a systematic and violent process. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and plaster dust. Suddenly, as I rounded a corner into a long hallway, a door to my left burst open. A cartel soldier, his eyes wide with surprise and rage, brought his AK-47 up. Time seemed to slow down. I knew I couldn't bring my own rifle to bear in time. "This is it," a small part of my brain registered with detached calm. Then the window at the far end of the hallway shattered inward and a red dot appeared on the man's chest. A fraction of a second later, he was thrown backward, a single neat hole in his torso. Ghost. He'd had my back from over 300 yards away, through a window, in the middle of a rainstorm. The bond of trust was absolute. "Thanks, Ghost." I breathed into my mic. "Anytime, Valkyrie." His calm voice crackled back in my ear. We continued our push, moving deeper into the belly of the beast. Intelligence had placed the hostages in a cellar. We found the door, heavy reinforced steel, at the end of a corridor. Hulk set a small specialized charge. "Stand back," he grunted. The explosion was sharp and contained, blowing the lock mechanism to pieces. I kicked the door in and was the first one through, my rifle up, sweeping the room. The cellar was small, damp and stank of fear and unwashed bodies. 2 guards were inside, startled by the sudden violence. They were professionals, not just thugs, and they reacted instantly, reaching for their sidearms, but they were too slow. My teammate and I engaged them simultaneously. The fight was over in less than a second. In the far corner of the room, 2 figures were huddled together on the dirt floor. They were bound and blindfolded with what looked like rough burlap sacks. Their bodies were trembling uncontrollably. The sounds of the firefight still echoed from upstairs, a brutal symphony of our work. My team immediately formed a secure perimeter around the cellar door. "Doc, check the packages," I ordered, my voice tight. Doc moved in, his hands gentle as he quickly assessed them for any life-threatening injuries. I holstered my rifle, the metal clicking softly into place. My hands were steady, but my heart was a wild bird beating against my ribs. Adrenaline mixed with a dizzying cocktail of emotions I couldn't begin to name. I knelt down in front of the two trembling figures. I reached out, my gloved hand hesitating for a fraction of a second, before my fingers closed around the rough fabric of the hood on the left. I pulled it off. It was Daniel. His eyes were squeezed shut against the anticipated blow, his face pale and streaked with grime and tears. Then I turned to the other man. I pulled the hood from my father's head. Their eyes, accustomed to darkness, blinked rapidly in the harsh, focused beams of our helmet-mounted lights. They were dazed, terrified, their expressions a mask of pure shock. They stared past me at first, at the armed soldiers in the room, at the grim reality of their salvation. Then their gazes fell upon me, upon the operator, kneeling directly in front of them, clad in black tactical gear, weapon grease smudged on her cheek. Daniel's eyes widened first. His mouth fell open, a silent gasp of disbelief. He shook his head slightly, as if he were hallucinating. Then my father's eyes found mine. The confusion in his expression warred with a dawning, horrified, impossible recognition. He saw the shape of my face beneath the helmet, the color of my eyes behind the sheen of sweat and determination. He saw his daughter, his disgraced, disowned daughter. In the middle of a bloody firefight, deep in the Colombian jungle, the world seemed to fall away, leaving only the three of us in a pocket of stunned, deafening silence, the unspoken history of 2 decades crashing down in a single shattering moment. "Package is secure. Time to move." The shout from one of my men broke the spell. The firefight upstairs was dying down, but we couldn't linger. The exfiltration window was tight. I stood up, my focus snapping back to the mission. I was no longer a daughter. I was a commander. "Get them up," I ordered, my voice a harsh bark that made both my father and brother flinch. "Hulk, get the big guy. I've got the other one." I grabbed Daniel's arm, pulling him to his feet. He stumbled, his legs weak. "Maya," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Move," I commanded, pushing him toward the stairs. "Get on the helicopter. Now." There was no time for explanations, no room for emotion. We were in the kill zone, and every second we stayed put increased the risk to my team. They were too shocked to argue, their minds unable to process the sheer surreality of the situation. They were herded through the carnage of the hacienda, past the bodies of their former captors, through the smoke-filled hallways, and out into the rain-swept courtyard, where the Black Hawk was descending, its rotors whipping the rain into a stinging frenzy. On the flight back to the forward operating base, the roar of the engines made conversation impossible. It was a welcome reprieve. My father and brother sat strapped into the jump seats opposite me, wrapped in emergency blankets Doc had given them. They just stared. They didn't look at the jungle racing by below, or at the other operators in the helicopter. Their eyes were fixed on me. They watched as I spoke into my mic, coordinating with the pilots and giving a situation report to Chief back at the TOC. They saw the seamless way I interacted with my team, the nods of respect, the shared language of professionals who had just walked through fire together. They were seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time, not as the rebellious daughter or the wayward sister, but as this warrior, this leader. The reality of what I had become was crashing down on them, and their faces were a mixture of awe, confusion, and a profound, gut-wrenching shame. I ignored their stares, focusing on my post-mission checks. I had to remain the commander until my men and the assets were safely back behind the wire. The emotional debrief would have to wait. Back at the base, the whirlwind of activity continued. My father and brother were immediately escorted to the medical tent for a thorough checkup. I, meanwhile, had to face Chief for the official mission debrief. I was bone-weary, running on the last dregs of adrenaline and caffeine. My gear was soaked, my muscles ached, and my mind felt like a frayed wire. Chief listened intently as I gave a concise, factual account of the operation, from infiltration to extraction. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, his eyes studying my face. Then he gave a slow nod, a rare and genuine smile touching the corners of his mouth. "You did good, Captain," he said, his voice filled with a quiet pride that warmed me more than any medal ever could. "Damn good. Go get cleaned up. I'll handle Sterling." That simple validation from him, from my chosen family, was all I needed. It settled something deep inside me, a sense of peace that had nothing to do with the two men in the medical tent. Hours later, showered and in a clean set of fatigues, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I walked to the infirmary. They were sitting on cots, sipping hot tea someone had given them. They looked small and lost under the harsh fluorescent lights. The silence when I entered was thick and uncomfortable. Daniel spoke first, his voice barely a whisper. "Maya, I don't understand. How? You?" He couldn't form a complete sentence. My father just sat there, staring at the floor, his hands clenched around his mug. He looked 10 years older than he had in the proof of life video. The arrogant titan of industry was gone, replaced by a broken old man. I stood before them, my arms crossed, my posture relaxed but guarded. I decided to meet their confusion with cold, hard facts. "The United States government does not negotiate with terrorists," I said, my voice flat and professional, the same tone I'd used in the debrief. "When American citizens are taken hostage, there are options on the table to ensure their recovery. I am one of those options." My father finally looked up, his eyes filled with a pain that was almost too much to bear. "All this time," he choked out, his voice raspy. "All these years, this is what you were doing?" "Yes," I said, and the single word carried the weight of 2 decades of silence and dismissal. "This is what I was doing." The unsaid words hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. "While you were closing deals and counting your money, I was becoming this. While you were calling me a disgrace, I was learning how to save your life. The thing you despised is the only reason you're alive." There was no triumph in it, no sweet taste of revenge, just a vast, sorrowful emptiness. We were held for 2 days at a secure embassy in the capital before they were cleared to fly home. In that time, we were forced to occupy the same space, the silence between us punctuated by the stilted, awkward attempts at conversation from diplomatic staff. The real conversation, the one that had been simmering for 20 years, finally happened on the last evening. We were in a private sitting room, a place designed to feel comfortable, but that only felt like a cage. My father, looking haggard in a borrowed suit, finally broke the silence. He cleared his throat, unable to meet my eyes. "Maya," he began, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't identify. I had no idea. The things I said to you, I was ignorant, I was arrogant." He finally looked up, his eyes pleading. "What you do, the person you've become, it's honorable. I was wrong. I am so sorry." A decade ago, those words would have been the balm to my soul, the validation I had craved more than air. But hearing them now, I felt a strange and hollow calm. The anger was gone. The hurt had faded to a dull, silvery scar. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his approval. His words couldn't fix the past, and more importantly, I no longer needed them to validate my present. My validation had been earned in the dust of Afghanistan and the jungles of South America. It came from the quiet nod of my commander and the absolute trust of the men on my team. "You were wrong," I said, my voice gentle but firm. There was no accusation in it, only a statement of fact. "You were wrong because you saw the world through such a narrow lens that you couldn't imagine a definition of success or worth that was different from your own." I stopped needing you to understand a long time ago. I took a breath, letting the final, most important boundary fall into place. I didn't do it for you, or for Daniel. I did it because it was my job. My team and I rescued 2 American citizens. The fact that they were my family is incidental. That's the end of it. He flinched, and I saw a flicker of the old Richard Rostova, the man who wasn't used to being dismissed, but it was quickly replaced by a look of dawning, painful understanding. The power dynamic had shifted, not just in that room, but in the universe of our family. I wasn't the little girl begging for a crumb of praise from his table anymore. I was the woman who had pulled him out of hell, and I had done it on my own terms. It's been 3 years since that day in Colombia. My relationship with my father and brother is different. It's not the warm, loving family I dreamed of as a child. That version of us never really existed and can't be resurrected now. The chasm between our worlds is simply too wide. But it's something. It's built on a foundation of their newfound, almost fearful respect, and my calm, detached acceptance. The phone calls are no longer monologues about Daniel's business achievements. Now they ask questions. Where are you? I can't tell them. Are you safe? Mostly. Is there anything you need? The first time my father asked that, I was so stunned I couldn't speak. They send care packages to a secure P.O. box, filled with things they think a soldier might want. Expensive socks, gourmet coffee, books. It's their clumsy, awkward way of trying to say they're sorry, of trying to be a part of a life they will never ever understand. And I accept them, because I realize it's the best they can do. In the end, the raid did more than just rescue 2 men. It rescued me. It freed me from the ghost of their disapproval that I had carried on my back for so long. I had gone into that jungle to save them, but I had emerged having saved myself. The truth is, I hadn't been fighting for their acceptance all those years. I had been fighting for my own. I had to prove to myself that my path had meaning, that my choices were valid, that my life had honor. And in the fiery crucible of that mission, I finally found the proof I was looking for. My worth was not something they could grant or withhold. It was something I had forged myself, in fire and sweat and sacrifice, and it was unbreakable. I learned a powerful lesson in that Colombian cellar. You cannot let anyone else define your value. The people who underestimate you, the ones who dismiss your dreams, are not the arbiters of your destiny. They are just spectators with a limited view. Your strength, your honor, and your purpose are your own, and you have to be the one to recognize them, even if no one else does. So I want to hear from you. Share a story in the comments below about a time you were underestimated and how you proved them wrong. Your stories give strength to others in this community, and I read as many as I can. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about finding your own way. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it with them. Thank you for joining me on this journey today. Thank you for listening. Remember that family is ultimately defined by love and respect, not just by blood. Be well and be strong.